Looking at how vast and diverse America is, it is not at all surprising that a large portion of US citizens have never been abroad. 2 lives are not enough to travel around the states and see all the sights of this country. I will not limit myself to just the Statue of Liberty and the Grand Canyon, but will tell you about 35 of the most iconic attractions of the United States that will help you get to know this amazing country more and be imbued with the American spirit. Go! Top 35 main attractions of the USA. 1. Statue of Liberty. If there is anything in this world more American than the stars and stripes, the dollar, and the bald eagle, it is the Statue of Liberty in New York. However, not everyone knows that the Statue of Liberty was not made in the USA, but in France. The creation of the colossal sculpture was led by the French sculptor Auguste Bartholdi, who, in turn, got this idea from the writer Édouard René Lefebvre de La Boulaye. The Statue of Liberty was conceived as a symbol of the victory of the Northerners over the slave-owning South, towards which the freedom-loving French did not have the best feelings. Work on creating the statue began in 1876, and 9 years later it was sent by ship to America, having previously been disassembled into several hundred parts. The grand opening took place in 1886, and since then, Lady Liberty has welcomed everyone arriving in New York. The pedestal on which the Statue of Liberty stands houses a museum dedicated to its history and also has an observation deck. 2. Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is located on the border between the United States and Canada, which is why both countries can boast of such a majestic natural attraction. However, it doesn't matter at all from which side you look at Niagara Falls, because it is beautiful from any angle. Compared to other waterfalls, Niagara is not so high, but it is very wide and powerful, which is why it is often put on a par with such giants as Victoria and Iguazu. For the sake of truth, it is worth saying that some of the flows were formed due to hydroelectric power stations built here in the 20th century, but at the same time it was possible to reach a compromise and largely preserve the pristine appearance of the natural monument. You can look at thousands of photos and videos of Niagara Falls, but you can truly understand its grandeur only by seeing it with your own eyes. 3. Empire State Building. The second most recognizable symbol of New York is, of course, the Empire State Building. Currently, this skyscraper is the 3rd tallest in the city, but at the time of construction it was the 1st in the world, rising 443 meters. This is especially impressive considering the fact that the Empire State was built back in 1931. At that moment, an economic crisis reigned in the world, and therefore the skyscraper was empty for a long time, and in fact, represented only a beautiful shell. Already 10 years after construction, all the premises were rented out, and the owners were able to receive their first income only in 1951 after the sale of the building. Today, rent for premises in the Empire State Building is one of the most expensive in the world, and among the tenants are large airlines, law firms, IT giants, real estate agencies, luxury brands, etc. And yet, tourists are much more interested in architecture and history, iconic New York skyscraper, as well as observation decks on the 86th and 102nd floors, which offer the same views of the capital of the world that are familiar even to those who have never been to New York. 4. Times Square. Times Square is an area in the heart of Manhattan, famous for a huge amount of neon advertising, Broadway theaters, and a rapid flow of people and cars that does not stop for a minute. Unofficially, Times Square is called the crossroads of the world because more than 300,000 pedestrians and about 100,000 cars pass through it every day, and the annual number of visitors is approximately 50 million people. In view of this, advertising on the main square of New York costs incredible money, but the effect is corresponding. Advertising in Times Square began to appear especially actively in the late 90s, and today there is even a special law requiring building owners to rent out all free surfaces for bright advertising billboards. There are many traditions associated with the main square of New York, but the most popular is the ceremony of lowering the crystal ball from the building of One Times Square. This action takes place every year on December 31st, a minute before midnight, and symbolizes the onset of the new year, and up to 1 million spectators come to watch the ball drop. 5. Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is very popular with Hollywood directors, so you've probably seen it in many American films. Work on its construction, which began in 1870, became one of the most ambitious and complex construction projects in U.S. history. In addition, the suspension structure of the Brooklyn Bridge was innovative at that time, which is why no one fully knew how it would behave in real conditions. Be that as it may, 13 years later, the construction of the bridge between Brooklyn and Manhattan was completed. Today, it is not only an important transport artery, but also a historical landmark. You don't need a car to visit the Brooklyn Bridge, as there is a pedestrian area in the middle with magnificent views. 6. Central Park. One of the most favorite vacation spots for New Yorkers and city guests is, of course, Central Park. It was founded in the middle of the century before last, and all its landscapes, despite their natural appearance, were created by hand. The park has several lakes, pristine nature areas, a zoo, children's and sports grounds, an ice skating rink, lawns for picnics, and countless alleys. Central Park has appeared in films more than 240 times since 1908, which means it is firmly entrenched in people's minds. Thanks to this, tens of millions of tourists visit it every year, which is why you are unlikely to find peace and quiet here, but there will be plenty of beautiful landscapes. 7. Museum Mile. The Museum Mile is a short stretch of Fifth Avenue in New York, along which 10 popular museums are located. You can get a closer look at world art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Neue Gallery, the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, the International Center of Photography, as well as the National Museum and the National Academy of Design. The German Cultural Center will tell you about the culture of other peoples. Goethe, the Jewish Museum, and the Barrio Museum, dedicated to the culture and art of Costa Ricans and Latin Americans in general. The Museum of New York will present you with several interesting exhibitions that give you a glimpse into the glorious past of the American city. Every year, every second Tuesday in June, a festival of the same name takes place on Museum Mile, during which admission to all 10 museums is free. There are especially many people on this day, but you can save several tens or even hundreds of dollars. 8. Solomon Guggenheim Museum. Solomon Guggenheim earned his fortune through entrepreneurship, but his soul was always drawn to art. He began collecting art back in 1890, and by the second half of the 1920s, he became very interested in the avant-garde and began actively buying works by contemporary artists. In 1937, Guggenheim founded a charitable foundation, which laid the foundation for an art museum in New York, bearing the name of the famous philanthropist and collector. The exhibitions of the Solomon Guggenheim Museum are extensive and are devoted to both modern and classical art of different eras, countries, and peoples. Here, you will find works by Chinese and African masters, art objects from the time of the Aztec Empire, more familiar works by Western European artists of the Renaissance, paintings by Russian avant-garde artists, and much more. 9. Grand Central Station. New York's Grand Central Station is not only the oldest, but also the most famous in the entire city. It was founded back in 1871, and the modern station building was erected at the beginning of the last century. This grandiose architectural masterpiece might not have survived to this day due to the decline in passenger traffic in the 1970s and the widespread closure of train stations. But thanks to U.S. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, the monument was preserved. The Central Station is still one of the largest railway hubs in the country, serving dozens of destinations, but many people come here as if they were visiting a museum. 10. Metropolitan Museum of Art. Over 6 million people visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art every year, making it one of the most popular art museums in the world. It was founded a little over 150 years ago by a group of American businessmen and art lovers. The building itself was erected by 1880, according to the design of the famous architects Mold and Vaux. The exhibition was based on 3 private collections, but subsequently the museum's holdings increased several times, and now the Metropolitan has at its disposal one of the largest collections of world art. The museum also includes the Costume Institute, which became famous for the Met Gala, an annual charity event that is attended by the world's top stars and shows off their outfits from famous couturiers on the red carpet. 11. Chinatown. According to recent estimates, about 900,000 people from China and nearby countries live in all of New York today, and one of the most famous areas populated by Asian migrants is Chinatown in Manhattan. The largest influx of Chinese population occurred in 1965. People settled here, bought homes, and opened their own businesses, and Chinatown gradually became overgrown with red lanterns, signs in Chinese, and appropriate architecture. In order to correspond to the established spirit of the area, even banks and other organizations that opened here began to decorate buildings in Asian style. In recent years, there has been an increasing trend in which Chinese migrants are assimilating and are no longer much different from other Americans. However, many of them are still faithful to traditions and continue to maintain an authentic Chinatown. 12. Brighton Beach people from the countries of the former USSR usually come to Brighton Beach. The area became a magnet for Soviet migrants back in the 1970s, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian-speaking population of Brighton Beach grew exponentially. There are a huge number of shops and catering establishments whose signs make it clear where their owners come from. Grocery stores, fashion boutiques, restaurants, video rental stores, and souvenir shops are all marked with bright signs that have either not been changed since the 90s or are deliberately stylized in this way. 13. Hollywood and the Walk of Fame. Hollywood is not a separate city at all, as is commonly believed, but only a district of Los Angeles. This is where most of the American film studios and houses where the main Hollywood stars live are located. The area's most popular attraction is the Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard. It is here that those same stars with the names of actors, directors, musicians, composers, dancers, as well as some scientists, athletes, and even astronauts are mounted in the sidewalk. Currently, there are more than 2,600 stars on the Walk of Fame. 14. Hollywood Sign, Los Angeles. In the 1920s, new residential developments were completed in the hills above the Hollywood district of Los Angeles. In order to advertise the property, the owners ordered the installation of the inscription, Hollywoodland on the Hill, which was supposed to be demolished in a year or 2. However, during that period, the rapid development of cinema began, which is why the advertising sign gradually became one of the symbols of Hollywood. The inscription received its current form in 1949, when, after reconstruction, the word land was lost. Subsequently, the main symbol of Hollywood was repeatedly destroyed, repaired, and attacked by pranksters and vandals, which is why the original structure was lost and a new one took its place in 1978. 15. Highway 66, Road of Roads, Main Street of America, Mother of Roads. They called the famous Highway 66, stretching almost 4,000 kilometers from Los Angeles to Chicago. Nowadays, when the highway system in the United States has received a new round of development, the legendary route has lost its importance while maintaining its status as a historical landmark. Even today, millions of travelers seek to travel along Highway 66. Along the way, you will find 8 states, a huge number of incredible views, and of course, an intimate acquaintance with American culture. 16. Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate in San Francisco is perhaps America's most recognizable bridge. Its total length is 2,737 meters, the length of the main span is 1,280 meters, and the mass of the entire structure reaches almost 900,000 tons. The Golden Gate Bridge got its name from the strait of the same name that it crosses. It, in turn, was named so by military topographer John Fremont, who saw in the strait similarities with the Golden Horn Bay in Istanbul. Golden Gate is famous not only for its picturesqueness, but also for the large number of suicides that previously occurred every 2 weeks. Lately, their numbers have decreased, but desperate people continue to come here. For security purposes, the bridge is patrolled, and special telephones are installed along the supports where you can call and receive psychological help. 17. Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay was originally used as a defensive fort and later became an impregnable prison for the most dangerous criminals. Other prisoners here included mob boss Al Capone, daring train robber Roy Gardner, and George Machine Gun Kelly, who liked to brandish a Thompson submachine gun during bank robberies. They escaped from Alcatraz more than once, but during the entire existence of the prison, not a single successful escape was recorded. Due to too high maintenance costs, Alcatraz was closed in 1963, and 10 years later, museum exhibitions were placed here telling about the life of the complex. 18. Willis Tower. The Willis Tower skyscraper was built in 1974, and for 25 years was the tallest building in the world. Today, it is considered the third tallest in America. Willis Tower, pitch black, instantly stands out from the rest of the skyscrapers and has long been an integral part of the architectural ensemble of Chicago. Every day, the skyscraper is visited by over 25,000 employees of various companies based here, and its observation deck on the 103rd floor attracts up to 1.5 million visitors every year. It's called Sky Deck and consists of glass booths protruding from the facade. The view from there is truly mesmerizing, but if you have weak nerves, it will take about 5 minutes to step onto the transparent glass floor of the site. 19. White House. The White House has been the residence of all American presidents for more than 220 years. Only George Washington was not here, since the White House was built in 1800, a few months after his death. The White House hosts presidential press conferences, meetings with leaders of other countries, and other socio-political events. The head of state sits in the famous Oval Office, the appearance of which changes depending on the preferences of the president. These and other rooms of the White House, where every corner is imbued with the history and spirit of America, can be visited as part of an official tour. 20. Capitol. The U.S. Congress, one of the 3 highest federal bodies of government, meets in the Capitol building in Washington. The first stone of its foundation was laid by George Washington himself in September 1793, after which decades of construction work followed in order to realize the grandiose plan. It is no coincidence that the building of the U.S. Congress was named Capitol, because that was the name of the temple in Rome, where meetings of the Senate and public assemblies were held. At the same time, the architectural appearance of the Capitol also corresponds, which is refined and majestic in Italian style. 21. Washington Monument. In 1832, the United States celebrated the 100th anniversary of the birth of America's first president, George Washington. In this regard, it was decided to erect a monument to the founding father. The winner was the project of architect Robert Mills, who proposed installing a colonnade with a tall obelisk and a statue of George Washington crowning it. However, later the project was criticized due to its high cost and was significantly simplified, as a result of which only a 169-meter obelisk was realized, the construction of which took more than 40 years. Today, the Washington Monument is considered the tallest obelisk on Earth, and before the construction of the Eiffel Tower, it was considered the tallest building in the world. In Washington, 100 years ago, a law was passed prohibiting the construction of tall buildings in the city that could surpass the Washington Monument. 22. Lincoln Memorial. Not far from the Washington Monument, there is a memorial complex dedicated to another American president, Abraham Lincoln. His reign occurred during the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, in which the slave-owning South clashed with the free North. Lincoln decided to abolish slavery and thus forever wrote his name on the pages of history. The memorial in honor of the 16th President of the United States was erected in 1922. It is a building with 36 columns. This is the number of states that united in the fight against slavery at the time of Lincoln's death. The center of the composition of the memorial complex is the statue of the president, on which Abraham Lincoln is depicted sitting in a chair and thoughtfully looking towards the Capitol. 23. Miami Beach. Miami Beach is located on a small island and is separated from Miami by Biscayne Bay. This city is one of the main resorts in the USA, and it is its embankment with houses illuminated by neon that we often see in photos on the internet. There is always a festive atmosphere here, and the snow-white sand and blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean instantly put you in a positive mood. People come to Miami Beach not for the sights, but for the kind of vacation during which you can forget about everything. 24. Mount Rushmore is named after American businessman Charles Rushmore, who organized the first expedition to the area in 1885. He also allocated $5,000 to create a sculptural composition, which today is one of the symbols of the United States. However, this amount turned out to be just a drop in the ocean, since the final cost of the project exceeded $1 million. To create the sculptures of the Founding Fathers, over 400 explosives experts, carvers, and drillers were involved. Mount Rushmore depicts the faces of 4 U.S. presidents who made the greatest contribution to the development of the country. George Washington achieved democracy, Thomas Jefferson created the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln eradicated slavery, and Theodore Roosevelt carried out important reforms for the state. 25. Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is one of the deepest canyons in the world, as well as perhaps the main natural attraction of America. Here you can find traces of 4 geological eras at once. Its scale and variety of rocks, caves, and other formations amaze the imagination. The depth of the Grand Canyon reaches a maximum of 1857 meters, and its width varies from 1 to 29 kilometers. This canyon was formed thanks to the Colorado River, which over several million years has repeatedly changed the strength and route of its flow, leading to extensive erosion. The river still flows here today, but has no longer had the same power and grandeur, which cannot be said about the Grand Canyon it created. This spectacle is completely and irrevocably impressive, so hurry up to see everything with your own eyes. 26. Monument Valley is a unique natural monument and one of the main symbols of the United States. This location has repeatedly appeared in westerns, which is no coincidence because the attraction is actually located on the territory of the Navajo Indian Reservation. Monument Valley is a spacious plain, on the territory of which high cliffs have been preserved, outcrops consisting of red sandstone resistant to external influences. 27. Hoover Dam construction of the dam began in 1931 and was completed in 1936, 2 years ahead of schedule. The hydraulic structure received its name in honor of the 31st U.S. President Herbert Hoover, who made a huge contribution to the implementation of such a grandiose project. Today, the Hoover Dam is still an incredibly huge structure, stunning in its scale and complexity of design. 28. Las Vegas Strip. In fact, not all of Las Vegas is filled with casinos and luxury hotels. The same Vegas with expensive cars, slot machines, and streets illuminated by a million lights is located within the 7-kilometer stretch known as the Las Vegas Strip. This is where you will find such famous casinos as Caesar's Palace, the Bellagio, the Red Rock, and others. There are no less hotels on the Strip with presidential rooms and world fame given by cinema. The atmosphere on the Las Vegas Strip is comparable to something extraterrestrial, so you need to visit here at least once in your life. 29. Black Rock Desert. In prehistoric times, Lake Lahontan was located here, and today, Black Rock is a huge, lifeless desert. At least this is the picture most of the time, because 8 days a year, when the Burning Man Festival is held, life here is in full swing. Every year, thousands of people come here and create an entire city out of trailers and tents, where the rules dictate having fun, sharing, expressing yourself, and being yourself. At Burning Man, no one will judge you for your appearance or worldview, and most participants usually dress up in a variety of costumes that represent their inner world. The culmination of the event is the burning of a wooden statue of a man, the same Burning Man. Before that, a little more than a week of vivid emotions and unforgettable impressions awaits you. 30. Yosemite National Park. Yosemite National Park is a place where nature demonstrates all its power, beauty, and diversity of landscapes. There are monstrous granite rocks, glaciers, powerful waterfalls formed by fast-moving rivers, crystal clear lakes, vast green groves, and much more. Yosemite's fauna is equally diverse, with hundreds of species of animals, including deer, lynx, foxes, and bears, known for their penchant for stealing food from cars and trash cans. The main attraction of Yosemite National Park is the Tulum Grove, where those very sequoias grow, reaching incredible sizes. 31. Disneyland in California. Today, there are Disneylands in many countries around the world, but the very first one appeared in 1955 in Anaheim, California. This place became the embodiment of the dream of Walt Disney, who wanted to create a park with familiar characters from fairy tales and cartoons, so that every child could find himself at least for a short time in a magical world. However, selfish goals cannot be denied, because Disneyland in California annually earns 9 zeros. Countless attractions and themed areas await you here, from Mickey Mouse's house to a Star Wars spaceport. In Disneyland, everyone will find something of their own, and adults will certainly plunge into childhood and forget about all their problems for a while. 32. Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is one of the most picturesque and unusual places on our planet. Mountains, caves, forests, waterfalls, rivers, lakes. All this is in abundance here, but the park is famous for its numerous geysers and other geothermal springs. Yellowstone has some of the world's most volcanic activity and is sometimes called a supervolcano because most of its current landscapes were formed by a cataclysmic eruption. In total, there are about 3,000 geysers in the park, which is 2/3 of the total number of geysers in the world. 33. Pentagon. The Pentagon building, which houses the headquarters of the US Department of Defense, was built in the first half of the 1940s. Since then, the appearance of the building has been firmly entrenched in popular culture, and the word Pentagon itself has become a common noun denoting the US Department of Defense. At the moment, the Pentagon is considered the world's largest office building. The total area of 5 floors is 604,002. The length of the corridors is more than 28 kilometers, and the number of employees located here reaches 26,000 people. 34. Denali National Park. One of the most beautiful places in Alaska is, without a doubt, Denali National Park. Many picturesque rivers flow through its territory, vast coniferous forests grow, and mighty cliffs rise thousands of meters, the tops of which are covered with a thick layer of snow. The highest mountain in North America, Denali, which was formerly known as McKinley, is also located here. Interesting fact, in the 19th century, the peak was called the Big Mountain and was the highest point of the Russian Empire, but after the sale of Alaska, this title went to Elbrus. The absolute height of Denali is 6,190 meters, which, combined with the difficult terrain, makes it one of the most difficult peaks to climb. 35. Moving Stones in Death Valley. The dried-up lake racetrack Playa, located in Death Valley National Park, is on the list of the most mysterious places on the planet. The reason for this is the stones that mysteriously move from place to place. Of course, with normal observation, you will not notice any movement, but the fact of their movement is obvious due to the long furrows behind. Someone immediately came up with dozens of theories, which included aliens and supernatural forces. A number of experts explained the movement of stones by the blowing of the wind, which becomes possible only when the soil gets wet. Others have suggested that the movements occur due to the ice crust that covers racetrack Playa in winter. At the moment, no one has given a definite answer to how the stones move in Death Valley.